Given the anonymity it provides, the internet is the ideal environment for malicious individuals to conduct business without repercussions or fear of being identified. In light of this, the internet has given birth to dark online activity that wouldn't have been possible in the days before its existence, and thus has become an extension of the dark side of human psychology. To explore this realm further, along with the psychological motivation of these individuals, we are joined by Dr. Michael Muchitelli, an NYS licensed psychologist, cyber psychology expert, and internet safety educator. He is also the founder of iPreditor Inc., which offers the private and public sectors free education and advisory services regarding internet predators, cybercrime, and cybercriminal psychology. With his career in psychology spanning back to the mid-90s, Michael spent many years working as a forensic psychologist fascinated by the dark side of human consciousness. In 2009, he published his concept of iPreditor, which aims to understand the psychology of online criminals and psychopaths and analyzes the methods they use to carry out their crimes and actions. In this episode, you will learn about the psychology that underpins psychopathy, how online psychopaths operate, and how they are distinct from your average psychopath that exists without the internet. We also discuss soft determinism and hard determinism when analyzing personality traits, and how early childhood experiences influence and potentially dictate the people we become. Now, if you like this episode, some other past Brain Spike back episodes you'll enjoy are true crime stories from the world of crypto hacks and ransomware, brain plasticity, how technology, environments, and language change our brains, and the psychology of conspiracy theory beliefs. Now, the last and most important message I want to leave you with before we get started with today's interview is that if you like this show, then please let us know by leaving us a positive review on iTunes. You really are making a difference when you leave those, so please take a moment to do so. Now that's everything, so here we have it. Enjoy. My name's Sam Breakgear, and you're listening to Brain Spike Back, your podcast exploring the intersection between psychology and technology.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me on. My name is Dr. Michael Muchitelli. I have a doctorate degree in clinical psychology, and I have been in practice. I got my doctorate degree back in the mid-90s, and ever since the mid-90s, I have worked in behavioral health care. And around 2008, 2009, prior to writing the iPreditor concept, I was a forensic psychologist. I've always been fascinated with what I call the dark side of human consciousness. And it wasn't until 2008, 2009 that I realized that if I were a psychopath, if I was a deviant, a pedophile, a criminal, well, where better to go where I can hide my identity and I can engage in nefarious, malevolent activities, cyberspace. And that is when the proverbial light bulb went off. And in 2009, I began to jot down my concept, iPreditor, and then I finally published it in late 2009, 2010.
Fantastic. Well, I'm super happy to have you on here because
thank you.
On this show, we obviously explore psychology and technology, and your background makes you a perfect fit for that. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you're going to be talking a lot about today, and that is iPreditor. So what is the concept of iPreditor?
Okay, so essentially iPreditor is, we can either say it's an information age, dark side of human consciousness concept, or much easier, the shorter is a dark side of cyberspace concept. So essentially, iPreditor introduces both the psychology of the aggressor, the online aggressor, and then how the pedophile, the criminal, the stalker uses technology, information communication technology, to molest, steal from, taunt, slander other online users. So essentially, iPreditor presents 8 different types of online aggressors. Would you like to hear them quickly, or would you like
to please share them.
Okay, so of the 8, hopefully I should remember them. I've written this 10 years ago. The pediatric manifestation of iPreditor is cyberbullying. So cyberbullying applies to children. The adult form of cyberbullying would be cyber harassers internet trolls and cyber stalkers, which are the worst of the adult online attackers. Then we have cyber terrorists. Then we also have cyber terrorism, online child predators, and then the most depraved to me is the online child pornography distributor and consumers. So those are the 8 types of online aggressors who essentially use information technology, social media to, as I said, to taunt, steal, molest other online users.
Yeah, in this show, we like to try and keep a balance of like looking at technology in a positive way and also in the negative ways. But there's absolutely no doubt that the internet has provided those with, I suppose, nefarious or malicious intent, the tools and ability to get away with a lot more and go a lot further. So I think like having your analysis and your understanding on this show is really going to help us like explore that. Now, one of the most interesting aspects of your website for me was the section on online psychopaths.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about online psychopaths?
If we can start off talking about just the psychopath, I mean, obviously the psychopath has walked the earth since, I would say, since the beginning of human civilization. So, when we look at the psychopath, again, in my past life, it wasn't that long ago, I was a forensic psychologist where I was doing forensic assessments in criminal court and family court and civil justice courts. Early on in my career, I was fascinated with what we're going to talk briefly about is the psychopath. And again, as a forensic psychologist, back then I wrote a concept called dark psychology, which is available at the website. It's free. And dark psychology is what I call the dark side of human consciousness. The psychopath is such an interesting, I don't want to say a person, they are not mentally ill. They are defined as having a characterological disorder. And what that means is, again, they are not Axis 1, they're not ICD-10 diagnosable, they're not bipolar, they're not thought disordered, they have a character disorder. And the psychopath does not experience, which is incredibly fascinating, they don't experience shame, they don't experience guilt, and they don't experience remorse, which when you think about it, that is absolutely incredible. So it's probably been about 10, 15 years ago, I went up to Toronto, and the father of understanding the psychopath is Dr. Robert Hare. And I went up there, never got certified, but I wanted to learn. I took 3-day seminar on the psychopathic deviance scale, which Robert Hare is the father of modern psychopathy. So essentially what I did is I took all the traits, all the qualities, all the behaviors, and I converted it to what it would mean if you came across a psychopath online. Hence, I call the online psychopath, or also I call the iPreditor.
And do you think that there's a distinction there? Do you think there's like a distinction in the sense like if the internet didn't exist, do you think they would still be just as psychopathic? Or do you think that with the internet, because they have this anonymousness, because they have access to so many more tools to harass or intimidate people, would they do this without the internet, essentially, is what I'm saying?
I'm sorry, that is a great question. I wish I could give you a definitive yes or no. We can assume, I mean, Dr. Harris says at any given time, anywhere from 1% to 3% of those walking on planet Earth are psychopathic. Obviously, there's no way to actually quantify that. There's also in the last 10 to 15 years, there has been a movement that, not that I subscribe to this notion, of the positive psychopath. We also know there is what is called the corporate or white collar psychopath. Many folks believe that some of our politicians are white collar psychopath. So when we're talking about psychology, technology, and the marriage of the two, as it relates to the online psychopath, do we first say that technology, social media, is that merely a tool or a medium for the psychopath? Or does technology actually help the psychopath and actually essentially propagates and makes more psychopathic? My belief is that all of us have the qualities of being psychopathic. Now, to be psychopathic is a behavior. So you and I, or relationships that we have, not all of us, but some of us can behave in a psychopathic manner. Many criminals can behave in a psychopathic way. Some pedophiles who molest children can behave in a psychopathic manner, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're psychopaths. Okay. Maybe someday we can do a separate show just on the criteria that make up a psychopath. But to answer your question, sorry for the long, explanation, but I believe that cyberspace increases psychopaths' ability to objectify, to steal, to harm other online users. Why? Because what I call the veil of anonymity. I can hide behind the proverbial computer screen. I can hide behind the mobile device, and you don't know it's really me.
Yeah, I have so many questions right now, especially relating to the changeability, like you mentioned. Like you said, how certain people can exhibit psychopathic traits. I kind of really would like to know, is it possible for a psychopath to change? Like, can a leopard change its spots if it is a psychopath?
Man, that's another great question. Boy, I should send you a word. That is a great question. There are some that believe, the belief is presently it is put forth that because it's a characterological disorder, whether we assume nature, nurture, genetics, it is believed that psychopathy, just like personality disorders, begins somewhere in adolescence, formulates, and by early adulthood, it's pretty set. So, but because it is a characterological disorder, there is no cure. Okay. You can give the individual medications, all the mood stabilizers, psychotropics you want. You can put them through reams of treatment. You can incarcerate them. But a psychopath, it is set in stone who they are. No matter what you do, the only thing you can achieve, just like with personality disorders, is you can reduce the negative consequences of being a psychopath. But you cannot all of a sudden create empathy in the psychopath, because, as I said, by late adolescence, early adulthood, for the rest of their lives, they look at you, they look at me, they look at all of us as objects.
Yeah, that raises some difficult questions as well, then I guess around rehabilitation and also like determinism in that sense. If the psychopath's always going to be a psychopath, then that's a hard one to deal with.
Right. Well, you bring up, if I may, when you bring up
go for it.
determinism, that is, I mean, we don't have to talk about philosophy, but as you know, we have hard determinism and soft determinism. My doctorate degree was from Adler University, based on Alfred Adler, and he was what would be called as a soft determinist. Okay, where Sigmund Freud would be a hard determinist. Where Freud believed is by time you get through the childhood phases, the Oedipal, all that other stuff, it's written in stone who you are. The soft determinist, who Alfred Adler was, said, yeah, basically early childhood experiences kind of, if I may say, set a pathway or a map, but as it doesn't dictate what you become. Because what Adler believed is, if you feel validated, if you feel part of a peer group, if you feel accepted in your community, well, all the genetics, all the early, childhood experiences that you had, whether they be traumatic or abusive, you still can become productive. So essentially, the soft determinist, which I am, believes that you can always change who you really are. But when we look at the psychopath can change, not cure, okay, the characterological disorder, but as I said, can reduce the negative consequences of being that psychopath.
That's good to know. Yeah, I guess I would call myself something along the lines of a soft determinist then. Hopefully you're enjoying the show, and if you are, make sure you subscribe and never miss an episode. You can find us on all your usual podcast sites: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, and a whole lot more, including YouTube. And we want to hear what you think, so be sure to leave us a review. Just search Brains Bite Back wherever you get your podcasts. I do have another concept that I wanted to discuss, as an interesting concept that you mentioned before our call, the Troll Triad. Now, what is this exactly?
Well, the Troll Triad is a concept that I wrote in, it is a subconcept of iPreditor. If I may, before we continue the Troll Triad, for your listeners to know whether they or somebody who may be targeting them is an iPreditor. Remember, there's 8 different types. First and foremost, very basic, is the use of information and communication technology to target, defame, steal from another person. So it's the use of technology. 2, which is, not to get into the legal eagle stuff, a little bit harder, is a self-awareness of causing harm to someone else using information technology. Again, when we're talking about mitigating factors with that particular criteria, well, if I am, for quick example, if I am, my religious dogma is I am staunchly against, let's say, abortion, and I target somebody online and I slander them using technology, I'm engaging in iPreditor tactics. But because my belief is I'm against abortion, my self-awareness or my understanding may be a little bit skewed, a little bit biased. And then when we have children that get online and target one another, like with cyberbullying, 2, the self-awareness can be a little cloudy. So first criteria is the use of information technology. 2 is the self-awareness of using information technology to hurt others. And then 3 is what I call cyber stealth. And what cyber stealth is prior to attacking somebody, it's using online deception and ways of being able to target somebody so that you could not be immediately identified and targeted as the person who is the cyber stalker, who is the cyberbully. So cyber stealth basically means is developing a methodology on how I'm going to attack you. So if an online user or online users, again, there are groups of those, meet those three criteria, they are iPredators. Okay. So now quickly getting to Troll Triad, not going into my own personal, but during 2014, 2015, I was trolled for over a year by 3 individuals. And what Troll Triad is it introduces the idea of, and it's based on Carl Jung a little bit, is that there are archetypes, and that when it comes to internet trolls and when they travel in groups, there are 3 archetypes. There is the cerebral, okay, and that is the one who is the brains of the disinformation and the slander campaign. There is the provocateur, the one who goes into social media and tries to provoke others. Come on, Sam, join me. That guy is okay, that is the provocateur. And then 3 is the crier. The crier in my situation, guess what? Had his own internet radio program and went on his radio show to slander me. And not only to slander me on the radio, but also to try to encourage his listeners to target me as well. So the Troll Triad is a concept that introduces groups of internet trolls, whether they be 3 or 3 million. They have task functions and how they're going to target another person, another group, and now, as we're learning over the past 5 to 10 years, other nations.
Yeah, it's crazy when it gets to that level. Like what happened with this person, if you don't mind me asking? Like, why did they have it in for you so much?
Well, to go into the specifics, we don't have that much time. I still don't know. Anybody can go and read Troll Triad. I haven't spoke to them, but I have to thank them because again, because of them, I was able to create the concept of Troll Triad. And if anything, even as of right now, we're talking about something that occurred over 5 years ago. It validates iPreditor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I can sit here and give you reasons to why they literally spent an entire year. And if I may, real quickly, not to get
Mm-hmm.
it into the personal, the Cerebro, okay, now I won't give you his name. You can read it on the website. He wrote a formal letter to the New York State Education Department Office of Professional Discipline, urging them to revoke my license to practice as a doctor of psychology, insinuating, get this, that I was engaging an attempted homicide by internet because the crier, the internet radio host, who in the midst of this year of trolling me had a heart attack.
Wow.
God bless him, he survived. But apparently, the Cerebro made the allegation that I had attempted suicide. I mean, homicide. I don't want to laugh because it wasn't silly. It wasn't funny then.
Yeah.
But he wrote a formal, well-written, and New York State Office of Professional Discipline had to do an investigation. Now, obviously, they laughed while they were doing it, but had to do it because the Cerebral wrote it according to specs on when you do a complaint.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well,
imagine if I had lost my license, I would have lost my career.
I admire the approach you've taken, though. You've definitely taken this and turned it into a positive. So I respect that a great deal. And
Thank you.
I suppose in the sense of taking things into your own hands, there's something else that you mentioned before our call. That was a cyber attack risk assessment. Can you elaborate on what this is?
Sure. Yes. The cyber attack risk assessments, I wrote a couple a year. At the website, there are 26 combined cyber attack checklists and cyber attack inventories. They're all in PDF form. They're all free. So anyone can go online to my website, print out and download the PDF. And what the 26 assessments cover is cyberbullying, cyber stalking, cybercrime. There is a parenting cyber assessment. So essentially 26 types of checklists and inventories to help an online user decide whether they and or their child or their business is engaging in high risk online activities, or if they are susceptible to being targeted. And those are the 26.
Yeah, I think that's worth taking. I still want to check that out. I love podcasting, but one thing that definitely has inspired some fear into me is the idea of how much information we put out there and how vulnerable we make ourselves. I had a conversation with someone that's a specialist when it comes to phishing attacks, and that's kind of like another obviously malicious sort of activity online. I suppose there's usually a financial gain from it, so it's not just psychopaths doing it for fun. But the more information you have out there, like me doing this podcast, and I reveal certain things about my life and the people in my life, it's always worrying that it could be used against you any time. So I think it's definitely important to stay smart, and that sounds like a good way of assessing risk, really.
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously, I mean, I've had people say to again, and I commend you on presenting because I do believe as you know, we were at the beginning of a period of history called the information age,
Mm-hmm.
and we are just dabbling in what could last or what will last several centuries. The next step that we see in the information age will be, virtual reality
Mm-hmm.
and artificial intelligence. It'll be interesting to see what a century from now, what AI and what virtual reality does. But going forward, the one online safety tip I can give, your listeners is personal information. And you kind of touched it.
Mm.
The more personal information you put online, the higher probability you are being targeted, whether it be by iPredators or by data mining folks. So the less personal information you post, you share, and you exchange, the safer you are. Now, you can't completely have a zero probability of being targeted, because in rare circumstances, it happens, even when you're practicing online safety. But, after working on the weekends for the last decade, I have volunteered helping the cyber attack. Obviously, I'm not a hacker. Now, I know hackers. I'm not a tech guru. My expertise is understanding the psychology of the online user who's an aggressor and assailant. And I can tell you the amount of personal information where the people that I've helped, where they have disclosed it online, I almost want to go through the computer and shake them and say, how the hell could you have said or done or posted that? And again, I understand we're at the beginning of the information age. And I've said, so for us, this is all an exploration. We're at the beginning of a period of history. My friend, someday, a century down the road, 100 years down the road, they're going to look back at us and they're going to laugh and they're going to say, how primitive and how archaic were they? But we are essentially the pioneers. At present, at least here in the United States, there is no such thing as criminal defamation. We have the First Amendment, freedom of speech, where I can say and post essentially whatever I want about you. I can be slanderous. And if you can't prove in a court of law that you've suffered significant, serious negative consequences, there's nothing you can do. That is the nature, that is the reality of what's happening right now.
I'm curious to know, you mentioned that, obviously we're at the beginning of this information age, so we're still going through a learning process. But how capable and effective do you think the current legal system is at tracking and stopping these malicious internet users?
Again, I am pro United States. I'm a patriot. I'm pro law enforcement. I was a forensic psychologist, so I have a lot of respect for the court system. But at present, even as of today, they all fall on deaf ears. Law enforcement, obviously are doing their best. In essence, and it amazes me because we have been in the information age for over 40 plus years. And to date, as of present, again, I can target you. And if you don't have evidentiary proof of suffering from my cyber attacks, there's nothing you can do in a court of law. And that is an unfortunate thing. Now, I understand, and this is where I have to defend law enforcement, but I would say over the last 11 years, I must have helped several hundred folks over the last 10 years. Not 90%, not 100%, but I would say 3/4 of them went to court systems and or law enforcement, and it fell on deaf ears. Why? Because it's so difficult to prove that your online attacker is hurting you.
Well, they say prevention is better than cure, and I know you've given us a few pointers on how our listeners can defend themselves, but I would love to close the show with, I suppose, your last and final thoughts and pieces of advice on how our listeners can protect themselves out there online from these malevolent individuals.
Okay, thank you. Well, the last thing which maybe we could talk about is for your listeners to think about, which is, I believe, is the true marriage of technology and psychology. As I call it, again, I hope I don't sound crazy. I don't think I am. Very quick, is that I believe that cyberspace, if not already is becoming an extension of human consciousness. Again, I'll say it again. Cyberspace is an extension of human consciousness. And I base this on my experience in my volunteer work, in my research. For some reason, those of us in the information age are slowly beginning to be so impacted by what we see, what we hear, and what we read online. The gullible, all the way going up to the most intelligent, can easily be skewed, can be impacted by what's going on online. Children, for the first time in civilization, we have a concept called cyberbullycide. These are children that are taking their lives, committing suicide because of how they're being attacked online. So what I want your listeners to think about when I say cyberspace is an extension of human consciousness, what I'm trying to say is that it's all a facade, it's all fantasy. Cyberspace is not real. Mm-hmm. The definition of cyberspace is an abstract digital environment, abstract and artificial. It's not real. But we as humans, with each year that passes, we seem to intuit, we seem to experience it as a real environment, but it's not. So that's what I wanted your listeners to think about. Cyberspace is an extension of human consciousness.
I think that's a fantastic point to end on. And as always, I like to give my guests the opportunity to send listeners to the website, their social media, or wherever they can find them. You've mentioned a few resources on the show already. Is there anything that you would like our listeners to go check out or to follow you anywhere?
Thank you very much. Easiest is iPreditor.org. That's iPreditor.org. And again, everything after my website is free, public domain. Anything that you download, the test, you don't have to give any personal information, no email address to download. Okay. All I ask is people who access my website, download my work. I'm not looking for attribution. I'm just asking people to practice what's called digital citizenship.
I think that's fantastic and that's very fair. Well, thank you for joining me today, Michael. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, thank you.
Tell Me Your Startup Will Disrupt Industries. I'll add you to a list of thousands of other entrepreneurs who have said the same thing and failed. Sure, you believe in your company and its product, but it's one thing saying this yourself and another to have an industry influencer say it about you. And that is the power of digital PR. If you're ready to gear your business towards growth and gain, our sponsor Publicize is a digital communication agency that has helped businesses like yours gain exposure in major online publications for the past decade. And for a limited time only, exclusive to Brains Bite Back listeners, you can receive an SEO assessment as part of your package for any tier of service at no extra charge with this special promotion. To find out more, visit publicize.co. This is the end of today's show. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this and you want to hear more episodes just like it, then follow and subscribe to Brains Bite Back wherever you get your podcasts. We're also available on YouTube under the channel of our publication, The Sociable. Just search Brains Bite Back and you'll find all of our episodes there. We really love hearing what you have to say, so leave us a review on iTunes or on any other podcasting platform to let us know what you think. You can also reach out on Twitter at The Sociable. And finally, go to sociable.co where you can find all our episodes and plenty of articles on topics just like this. Thanks again for joining us, and until next time, stay safe and stay healthy.